Dry prairie stretched to the horizon, broken only by low grass, wind-bent shrubs, and a narrow river that cut through the dust like a stubborn scar. In that lonely place, just far enough from the nearest frontier town to be forgotten, stood an old blacksmith's forge built from warped timber and stone darkened by years of smoke. Jacob lived there. He had for a long time, long enough that even he had stopped counting the years. The forge was his world. The anvil sunk deep into the ground, the bellows patched and repatched, the heavy hammer worn smooth where his palm met iron day after day. He knew the language of heat and metal better than the language of people. Every morning followed the same rhythm. The fire was fed before the sun fully cleared the hills. Coal cracked and hissed. Iron glowed dull red, then brightened to orange. Jacob's hammer came down in steady practice blows, measured, patient, unforgiving. Hammer to anvil, metal answering metal, sparks bursting like brief stars against the dark. The wind slipped through the open doorway, carrying the scent of dry grass and river mud, sweeping red dust across the packed earth floor. It tangled with smoke and heat and left a grit on his skin that no amount of washing ever fully removed. Jacob rarely spoke while he worked. Words felt clumsy in his mouth, unnecessary. Iron, at least, told the truth. It bent when it was ready. It cracked when pushed too far. There were rules to it, simple, honest rules, and he trusted those. People were different. The town came and went from his life like passing weather. Ranchers brought horses for new shoes. Farmers came with broken plow blades. Wagons rolled in with loose axles and rolled out again once Jacob had set them right. Payment was sometimes coin, sometimes food, sometimes nothing more than a nod of thanks. He never asked for more. When the work was done, Jacob returned to his forge, his river, his silence. Some nights he sat outside after the fire died down, watching the sky darken and the stars appear one by one. The prairie sang then, crickets, distant coyotes, the low murmur of water over stone. It was a sound that filled the empty spaces without demanding anything from him. This was the life he had settled into. Not a bad life, just a narrow one. He told himself it was enough. That morning began no differently than the hundreds before it. Jacob was shaping a length of iron for a wagon rim, sweat tracing slow paths down his back, when a shift in the air made him pause. Not a sound exactly, more a presence, the kind that unsettled the rhythm without breaking it. He set the hammer down. At the edge of the forge doorway stood a woman he had never seen before. She did not step inside. She waited, respectful of the heat and the work. Her posture was calm, grounded, as if she belonged to the land itself rather than to any road that led to the forge. She was Apache. Her dark hair was braided simply down her back, touched with dust from the trail. Her clothes were practical, worn but carefully kept, shaped for labor rather than display. In her hands she carried a knife. Its blade snapped clean near the middle, the break old and dull with use. What struck Jacob most was not the knife. It was her eyes. They did not roam or search. They did not challenge him. They simply rested on him, quiet, steady, carrying a depth that felt earned rather than given. There was no urgency in her gaze, no expectation, just patience. Jacob wiped his hands on a rag and nodded once, a small acknowledgement. He did not ask her name. He did not ask where she had come from. He understood enough to know that some things were offered only when ready. She stepped forward and placed the broken knife on the wooden bench beside the anvil. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The forge crackled behind Jacob. The wind shifted, lifting dust from the ground and carrying it between them. Somewhere downriver, a bird called out, sharp and brief. Jacob picked up the knife. The weight of it told him it had been used often. The handle was worn smooth by a familiar grip. This was not a thing easily replaced. He looked up at her again. "I can fix it," he said, his voice rough from disuse. "It'll take time." She inclined her head slightly, as if she had expected nothing else. And just like that, without ceremony, without promise, something in Jacob's quiet, measured life shifted. The hammer would keep falling. The fire would keep burning. But from that moment on, the forge would no longer be only his. Luna did not speak much. The first time she came back after that morning, she arrived the same way, quietly, without announcement. The forge door was open, heat rolling out into the prairie air, and Jacob was already working. He did not look up right away. He heard her steps stop just outside the threshold, heard the soft sound of something set down on wood. When he finally turned, the knife lay on the bench where he had left it, and Luna had taken a seat on a low stump beside the forge wall. She waited. That became the pattern. Jacob worked, Luna waited. He brought the blade back to life the way he knew best. Slow heat, careful strikes, patience where haste would ruin everything. The iron resisted at first, stubborn from years of use, but Jacob understood that kind of resistance. He had lived most of his life shaped the same way. Outside, Luna pulled a strip of worn leather from her bag and began stitching a torn basket. Her fingers moved with quiet skill, steady and sure. She did not watch him work. She did not ask questions. She simply sat within reach of the forge's warmth, mending what had been broken. They spoke only when necessary. "How long?" she asked once. "By sundown," Jacob replied. She nodded. That was enough. When the knife was finished, he handed it back without ceremony. The edge was true, stronger than before, tempered carefully so it would not fail her again. She weighed it in her hand, testing the balance, then inclined her head in thanks. She returned the next week, then the week after that. Sometimes she brought a tool, a cracked hoe blade, a bent hook, a worn hinge. Sometimes she brought nothing at all, only herself, settling again on the stump as if that spot belonged to her now. Jacob did not question it. He had lived long enough on the frontier to know that some people carried reasons they did not speak aloud. Luna felt like one of those people. Asking would only cheapen the trust that was forming, quiet and fragile as a new flame. On one of those mornings, Jacob burned his hand. It was a small thing, just a careless moment when iron slipped and brushed his skin. But the pain was sharp, immediate. He hissed under his breath, shaking his hand until the sting dulled into a deep, aching throb. When he looked up, Luna was already standing. She crossed the space between them without hurry and reached into her satchel. From it, she pulled a bundle of dried leaves and crushed stems, bound in cloth. She soaked them with water from her canteen, then pressed the cool mixture gently against his burn. He stiffened at the contact, not from pain, from surprise. "It helps," she said quietly. Her voice was calm, unassuming, as if she were stating a simple fact rather than offering care. Jacob nodded once. He let her. The poultice eased the heat almost immediately, drawing the fire out of his skin. He wrapped the cloth as she showed him how, careful not to disturb her work. "Thank you," he said. Luna met his eyes briefly, then returned to her seat. From that day on, she brought the herbs with her. Jacob never asked for them, and Luna never offered an explanation. It was simply understood. In return, Jacob did something he had never done for a customer before. He kept her blade. Not because it needed more work, it was finished, but because he wanted to make it better. He reforged the spine, reshaped the edge, balanced it until it felt like an extension of the hand that would hold it. He did not tell her he had done more than necessary. He simply placed the knife in her palm when she returned, watching as she felt the difference. Her fingers paused. She looked up at him, something unspoken passing between them. "It's good," she said. Jacob only shrugged. "It'll last." That was how things grew between them. Not in confessions or promises, not in questions about where they came from or what they had lost, but in gestures so small they could have been missed. A cup of water set beside her while she stitched, a place cleared for her tools near the bench, her waiting without impatience, his listening without interruption. The forge became quieter when she wasn't there. Jacob noticed it then, the absence of her steady presence, the way the space felt slightly hollow without the soft scrape of leather or the rustle of cloth. He did not name the feeling. On the frontier, naming things too early could make them fragile. So Jacob kept working, and Luna kept coming. Neither of them spoke of what was forming between the hammer's fall and the long hours of waiting, but both felt it, steady and growing, shaped not by words but by time. Years did not arrive loudly on the frontier. They slipped in quietly, carried by changing seasons and the slow wearing down of things that once felt new. One winter bled into the next. Springs came late, summers burned hot and dry, and the river near Jacob's forge kept moving at its own patient pace, indifferent to who stayed and who left. The town changed. New faces passed through. Ranch hands chasing wages, traders with wagons full of promises, men with restless eyes who never planned to stay. Others disappeared without farewell, pulled westward by rumor or south by hunger. Buildings were razed, then abandoned. A saloon burned down and was rebuilt with cheaper wood. A church added a bell. Through it all, Jacob remained. The forge still stood by the river, its stones darkened by smoke, its doorway open to the wind. Jacob's days followed the same familiar pattern: fire, iron, hammer, sweat, silence. His hands grew stronger, more scarred. His movements more economical, more sure. The forge shaped him as much as he shaped the metal that passed through it. And Luna kept coming. She arrived with the seasons, steady as the river. Sometimes she brought tools from her family's land, blades dulled by soil, hinges bent by hard use. Other times she brought nothing but herself and the quiet presence she carried so easily. She never announced her arrival. She never lingered longer than she felt welcome. She simply appeared, waited, and left when the work was done. Jacob came to recognize the sound of her steps before he saw her, the way dust shifted beneath her boots, the pause she took at the edge of the forge, as if asking permission without words. He always nodded. They spoke little, but what they shared grew familiar. He learned which mornings she preferred to sit closer to the fire, which afternoons she chose shade instead. She learned when not to interrupt his work and when to offer water without asking. There were days when neither of them said a single word from sunrise to dusk, and still something passed between them. The town noticed. People always did. A rancher once leaned against the forge doorway and smirked. "Apache girls here again," he said, like it was a joke meant to land somewhere between curiosity and accusation. Jacob did not look up. He kept hammering. Another time, a woman in town asked Luna if she planned on staying so close to a white man's forge. Her tone was light, but her eyes were sharp. Luna smiled politely and said nothing. Whispers followed them like dust on the wind. Some said Jacob was foolish, too quiet, too distant to know what he had. Others said Luna was only using him, that she came for the work and nothing more. A few suggested darker things, things spoken in low voices meant to sting. None of it reached either of them directly, but they both felt it. Jacob heard it in the way conversation stopped when he walked into town for supplies. Luna saw it in the looks that lingered too long, the half-questions that never quite formed. Still, neither of them spoke of it. Jacob did not say what lived beneath his ribs when Luna sat near the forge, mending her baskets, her presence grounding the space around him. He did not name the quiet pull he felt when she was gone, or the way the forge seemed louder in her absence. Luna did not ask why he never spoke of his past, why he never asked about hers. She did not ask if she was welcome, or if there was more meant to be said between them. They both knew. To speak would be to change things, and change on the frontier was never simple. Jacob had built his life on steadiness, on knowing what would be there when the sun rose and what would remain when it set. The forge was predictable. The iron obeyed its laws. Silence was safe. Luna, too, understood the cost of disruption. Her world had taught her caution. Words once spoken could not be taken back. And once a line was crossed, there was no returning to the quiet ground on which they stood. So they stayed where they were, in the space between what was and what might be. Year after year, Jacob remained the blacksmith by the river. Luna remained the Apache woman who came to him with broken tools and steady patience. The town continued to change around them, and the whispers continued to drift. But between hammer and anvil, between waiting and working, time passed without resolution. And neither of them dared to ask whether silence was preserving what they had or slowly costing them everything. The first sign was the silence. Luna did not come. At first, Jacob thought nothing of it. Days on the frontier were unpredictable. Weather shifted, roads flooded, work pulled people away without warning. He told himself she would return when she could. But one day passed, then another, then a week. The stump by the forge remained empty. No basket stitching, no quiet presence settling into the rhythm of his work. Jacob kept the fire burning, kept the hammer moving, but the space beside the doorway felt wrong, unfinished, like a sentence cut short. 2 weeks later, he heard it in town. He hadn't gone in for news. He needed iron stock and coffee beans, nothing more. But the frontier had a way of offering information, whether you asked for it or not. "She's seeing someone," a man said near the feed store, his voice low but careless. "Who?" another asked. "Got land south of the ridge. Cattle, too. Well set." Jacob didn't stop walking. He didn't slow. He didn't turn. The words followed him anyway. Luna, another man, land, livestock, standing. It made sense, too much sense. That night, when Jacob returned to the forge, the fire seemed weaker, though he knew he had fed it properly. The iron took longer to heat. His hands felt stiff, unresponsive. When the hammer fell, the sound rang sharper, colder. He worked until the moon climbed high and the forge finally went dark. Jacob did not curse the man whose name he didn't know. He did not blame Luna. He had lived long enough to understand the shape of such choices. On the frontier, security mattered. Land mattered. A future that could be seen mattered. Silence did not build fences. Waiting did not put food on a table. Still, something inside him tightened, quiet and stubborn. The forge felt colder in the mornings after that, the air heavier. The river sounded farther away, as if it had shifted its course without telling him. Luna stayed gone. Time stretched. Summer leaned toward fall. Grass yellowed, wind sharpened. Jacob returned to his old habits, the ones he had before Luna ever appeared at his door. Work, eat, sleep, repeat. The rhythm steadied him, but it no longer filled the space the way it once had. Then one afternoon, without warning, she came back. Jacob heard her before he saw her. The familiar pause at the threshold, the soft scrape of boots against packed dirt. He looked up from the anvil, expecting the quiet relief he had always felt at her presence. What he saw made him still. Luna stood at the edge of the forge, hands folded loosely in front of her. She looked the same at first glance. Same braid, same worn clothing, same calm posture. But her eyes were different. They were steadier, more guarded, as if something had settled behind them, something heavier than before. She did not smile. Jacob nodded the old acknowledgement. "Afternoon," he said. "Afternoon," she replied. Her voice was even, controlled. She set a broken hinge on the bench, the metal bent out of shape by hard use. "If you've got time." "I do," Jacob said. He took the hinge and turned back to the fire. The familiar work grounded him, gave him something to focus on, while the silence between them stretched. Luna took her seat on the stump, but she sat straighter than before. Her hands rested still in her lap. She did not pull out leather or thread. She did not watch his work. They did not speak again until the hinge was finished. Jacob handed it to her. Their fingers brushed briefly. Nothing unusual, nothing improper. But the contact felt different now. Distant. Careful. "It'll hold," he said. "I know," Luna replied. She hesitated, then spoke again. "I won't be coming as often." Jacob nodded once. "All right. No questions, no protest." She stood, slipping the hinge into her satchel. Before leaving, she looked around the forge as if committing it to memory, her gaze lingering on the anvil, the bench, the doorway where she had waited so many times before. "I appreciate your work," she said. Jacob met her eyes. "Anytime." She inclined her head and turned away. When she was gone, the forge seemed louder than it had ever been. Jacob stood there for a long moment, the smell of iron and smoke heavy in the air. He understood now what had changed. Luna had chosen a path that offered certainty. She had stepped forward, while he had remained where he was. He could not fault her for that. But as the fire crackled and the wind carried dust through the doorway, Jacob felt the weight of what he had never said, and the quiet truth settled in his chest like cooling iron. Someone else had come first. The forge had known quieter days. Not silent, never silent, but subdued in a way Jacob felt deep in his bones. The fire still burned. The hammer still fell. Yet every sound seemed to echo longer than it used to, as if the space itself were listening for something that no longer came. Luna returned less often now. When she did, her visits were brief, purposeful. She brought a tool, waited while Jacob worked, then left without lingering. The easy pauses they once shared had tightened into something formal, careful. Neither of them mentioned the weeks she stayed away. Neither of them spoke of the man whose presence Jacob felt even when he wasn't there. Jacob told himself this was the way things were meant to settle. But iron has a way of teaching hard truths. It resists until it doesn't. It bends when pressure is applied long enough. And one afternoon, as Jacob quenched a glowing blade and watched the steam rise and vanish, he understood something he could no longer ignore. Silence had not protected what he cared about. It had only delayed the loss. Luna came near dusk that day. The sky was low and pale, the light flattened by distant clouds. She stood at the edge of the forge, her shadow stretching across the packed earth. Jacob set his tools down before she could speak. "Luna," he said. She paused, surprised by the sound of her name on his tongue. "Yes?" "Sit a moment," he added, "if you've time." She hesitated. Then she nodded and took the stump, folding her hands together as she always had. But her posture was different now, upright, guarded. as if ready to leave at the first sign of discomfort. Jacob leaned against the bench, the heat of the forge at his back. His hands felt heavy, clumsy. Words did not come easily to him. They never had. "I'm not good at this," he said. Luna's gaze softened slightly. "At talking?" He gave a short, dry breath. "At saying things before it's too late." She did not interrupt him. "I've spent years keeping my head down," Jacob continued, "thinking if I didn't disturb the ground, nothing would break. That if I stayed where I was, what mattered would stay too." He looked at her then, really looked. The steadiness in her eyes, the distance he had helped create. "I think about you," he said. The words were plain, unadorned, honest. "More than I should for someone who's only a neighbor, more than a passing thought. I think about you more than a man thinks about a friend." The forge crackled behind them. Somewhere downriver, water moved over stone. Luna went very still. For a moment, Jacob feared he had spoken too harshly, too directly. He was ready to pull the words back, to apologize for crossing a line that had kept them safe for so long. But Luna did not recoil. She closed her eyes briefly, as if steadying herself, then opened them again. When she spoke, her voice was quiet and measured. "If you had said that sooner," she began. Jacob's chest tightened. She did not finish the sentence right away. She didn't need to. The meaning lived in the space she left between the words. "If you had said it before," Luna continued, "things might have been different." There was no bitterness in her tone, no accusation, just a simple truth laid bare. Jacob nodded slowly. "I know." She exhaled, her shoulders lowering just a fraction. "I wondered," she admitted, "for a long time. But wondering doesn't build a life." "No," Jacob said, "it doesn't." They sat with that for a while, the weight of it settling between them like cooling iron. Luna did not speak of the man she was seeing. Jacob did not ask. They both understood the boundaries that had formed. Quiet, firm, unyielding. "I didn't say anything because I was afraid," Jacob added at last. "Afraid that if I named it, I'd lose what we had. Turns out I lost it anyway." Luna looked at him then. Really looked, the way she had the first day she stood at the edge of his forge. There was sadness there, but also acceptance. "You didn't do this to hurt me," she said, "and I didn't choose him to hurt you. Time just moved." He managed a small, wry smile. "Time's good at that." She stood smoothing her skirt. "Thank you for saying it now," she said softly. "Even if it's late." Jacob watched her go, the sound of her steps fading into the prairie wind. The forge felt emptier than ever, but also strangely lighter. He had finally spoken. And though the words had not changed the past, they settled something inside him, an ache he had carried too long without naming. Some truths, he realized, don't arrive in time to save what was. They arrive to teach you what silence has cost. The fire burned low as night crept in, and Jacob let it, standing alone with the echo of words he wished he had found years before. The man Luna was seeing was not cruel. That was the part that made it harder to name what felt wrong. He owned land south of the ridge, good land by frontier standards, grazing pasture that held through dry seasons, a modest herd of cattle, a solid house, a future that could be pointed to with confidence. In town, people spoke his name with approval. He paid his debts. He showed up when it mattered. He was, by every visible measure, a reasonable choice. And at first, Luna believed that might be enough. He did not raise his voice. He did not strike her. He did not forbid her from seeing people outright. Instead, his doubts came quietly, slipped into conversation like sand into boots. "You spend a lot of time down by that forge," he said once, not looking at her when he spoke. "What's there that keeps you so long?" She answered plainly, "Work, repairs, Jacob helps us." He nodded, but his jaw tightened. "Seems unnecessary." When Luna spoke of her days, of exhaustion, of the weight of expectation placed on her shoulders, he listened only long enough to respond. "You worry too much," he said. "You read into things." That's just how life is out here. Each sentence was delivered calmly, as if he were offering solutions rather than dismissal. And when she grew quiet, he took it as agreement. What he did not understand was that Luna did not need answers. She needed space. She needed to be heard without being corrected. Jacob had done that without trying. That, more than anything, unsettled the man. He did not like the way Luna spoke of the blacksmith. Not fondly, not openly, but with a familiarity that came from years of shared silence. He did not like the fact that Jacob never inserted himself, never competed, never demanded. Men like that were unpredictable. One afternoon, the three of them ended up in the same place. Town was busy that day. Wagons lined the main road. Voices overlapped. Dust hung thick in the air, stirred up by boots and hooves alike. Jacob had come in for supplies, his list short, his presence unremarkable. He did not see Luna at first. Then he heard her voice. She stood near the hitching post with the man beside her. He was speaking, his tone easy, his posture relaxed in the way of someone who believed the ground beneath him was solid. "Well, if it isn't the blacksmith," he said, spotting Jacob. His smile was thin. "Always figured you'd be around here somewhere." Jacob stopped, nodding once. "Afternoon." The man turned to Luna. "This is him, right? The one fixing tools for free every other week?" Jacob said nothing. He did not defend himself. He had never been good at that. Luna's eyes flicked to Jacob, then back to the man beside her. "It's fair work," she said evenly. The man laughed, loud enough for others to hear. "Fair work, sure. But a man ought to know his place. Hanging around alone by the river all day doesn't build much, does it?" A few heads turned. Jacob felt the familiar tightening in his chest, the instinct to retreat rather than escalate. He met the man's gaze briefly, then looked away. He had learned long ago that dignity did not require an audience. What he did not expect was Luna's reaction. She did not step forward. She did not raise her voice. She did not argue. She simply went still. The laughter faded when it met her silence. The man looked at her, waiting for agreement, for reassurance that his words had landed where he intended. Luna said nothing. Her quiet stretched longer than was comfortable, longer than politeness allowed. People nearby began to sense the shift, the subtle tension settling into the space like an incoming storm. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was calm but firm. "That's enough." The man frowned. "I'm just saying—" "I know what you're saying," Luna replied. "And I don't agree." He stared at her, surprised. "You're taking this too seriously." Luna did not answer. She turned away instead, her silence louder than any protest. It was not submission, it was refusal. For the first time, she did not soften herself to preserve peace. Jacob watched her go, the crowd parting instinctively as she passed. He did not follow. He did not speak. He understood what had happened. The man had been reasonable, logical, approved by the town, but reason without listening had limits, and Luna had reached them. As Jacob walked back toward the edge of town, he felt no triumph, only a quiet ache. He knew then that whatever choice Luna would make, it would not come easily. But something had cracked. And once cracked, no amount of reason could force it whole again. The night came in quietly. No storm, no warning, just the steady dark settling over the prairie. The sky stretched wide and heavy with stars. The forge sat low by the river, its fire reduced to embers, the heat lingering in the stones long after Jacob had finished his work. He was closing the doors when he heard footsteps, slow, familiar, unhurried. Jacob turned before he saw her. Luna stood a few steps from the forge, her figure outlined by moonlight and the faint glow of dying coals. She did not carry tools, no basket, no broken iron, just herself, wrapped in a thin shawl against the night air. She did not look lost. She looked tired. Jacob did not ask why she was there. He had learned that some arrivals carried their own explanations. "You can come in," he said simply. She nodded and stepped closer, stopping just inside the doorway. The forge smelled of iron and ash, the same as always. The river murmured nearby, steady and indifferent. Luna did not sit right away. "I didn't come to ask for a place to sleep," she said. Jacob inclined his head. "All right. And I didn't come looking for anything else," she added, careful with her words. "I know," he replied. She exhaled then, a long breath she seemed to have been holding for days, maybe longer. Her shoulders lowered, the tension easing just enough for the truth to surface. "I'm tired," Luna said quietly. "Tired of making myself smaller so things don't break." Jacob listened. "I tried," she continued. "I told myself that if I stayed calm, if I didn't push, if I accepted what was offered, it would be enough. That wanting more meant asking for trouble." She looked down at her hands. They trembled slightly, though her voice remained steady. "But every day it felt like I was folding myself in half, trimming pieces away, choosing silence where my words should have been." Jacob said nothing. He moved a stool closer to the fire and set it down without comment. Luna noticed. After a moment, she sat. "I left him tonight," she said. The words did not sound dramatic. There was no anger in them, just certainty. "I didn't leave because of you," Luna added, lifting her gaze to meet Jacob's. "I need you to understand that." "I do," he said. I left because I didn't recognize myself anymore, she went on. Because every time I spoke, I felt like I was being corrected. Every time I was quiet, he thought he'd won an argument I never started. Forge crackled softly. Outside, an owl called once, then fell silent. I kept thinking I could endure it, Luna said. That endurance meant strength, but all it did was make me disappear. Jacob felt the weight of her words settle in his chest, familiar and sharp. He knew something about endurance, about surviving by shrinking your needs to fit the space you were given. He also knew its cost. You don't have to disappear here, he said quietly. Luna nodded. That's why I came. She did not reach for him. She did not close the space between them. She simply sat, hands resting in her lap, breathing in the heat of the forge like someone thawing after a long cold. Jacob did not ask her to stay. He did not tell her what this could become. He understood better now than ever that pressure, no matter how well meant, only created another kind of cage. Instead, he opened the side door wider to let fresh air in. He added another chair near the fire, and he waited. They sat together without speaking for a long while. The silence between them was different than before. Not guarded, not heavy. It was a silence that allowed room. Luna's shoulders slowly relaxed. The tightness in her posture eased. She leaned back, eyes closed, letting the warmth reach her bones. Thank you, she said after some time. For what? Jacob asked. For not asking me to be anything tonight, she replied. He gave a small nod. You don't owe anyone anything right now. She opened her eyes then and looked at him. Not with longing, not with expectation, but with relief. That's all I needed, she said. The night deepened around them. The forge fire dimmed to a soft glow. And for the first time in a long while, Luna did not feel like she had to leave a part of herself at the door. Jacob remained where he was, steady and present, offering nothing more and nothing less than space. And that was enough. Nothing changed all at once. There was no moment where the world shifted and placed them suddenly on the same side of something new. No promises were made. No lines were crossed. What passed between Luna and Jacob in the days that followed was quieter than that, measured, deliberate, shaped by caution as much as by hope. Luna did not stay the night. She left the forge before dawn, thanking Jacob with a nod and a look that carried more rest than certainty. And when she returned later that week, it was not with expectation, but with the same careful presence she had always carried. They began to walk together, not as something declared, but as something practical. The path along the river was well-worn, its banks lined with tall grass and smooth stones polished by years of moving water. They walked side by side, close enough that their shoulders might brush, but they did not reach for each other. The river did most of the talking. Sometimes Luna spoke about her days, small details, moments that had weighed on her more than she realized. Jacob listened without interruption, without advice. He had learned slowly that listening was not a skill you mastered, but a choice you made again and again. Other times Jacob spoke. Not much at first. Just fragments. A sentence about the forge. A memory of a winter when the river froze so hard the stones split. He stopped when words felt thin. Luna did not push him to continue. She waited, the same way she always had. They shared meals when the light began to fade. Simple food. Stew warmed over the forge. Bread torn rather than cut. Coffee strong enough to carry them through the evening. They ate sitting on overturned crates or flat stones by the river. The kind of meal that filled the body without asking anything of the future. They did not speak of what might come next. Luna needed time. She felt the pull to rush, to replace what she had left with something solid, something reassuring. But she resisted it. She walked the land where she had grown up. She returned to her family. She let herself sit alone with the parts of her that had gone quiet for too long. Jacob watched from a distance, learning not to mistake patience for absence. He needed time too. For years he had lived as though silence were a form of protection. Speaking his needs felt dangerous, like striking hot iron without knowing how it would bend. Now he practiced saying small things out loud. I don't like that, he said once when a trader tried to short him. I need time, he told Luna another day when she asked about a repair. I should have said something sooner, he admitted quietly, though he did not yet know what to do with the regret. Luna heard him. She did not correct his pace. She did not rush him forward. She understood that growth, like metal, had to be worked slowly or it would break. There were moments of closeness, a shared laugh over a burnt pot of stew, A long pause where neither of them felt the need to fill the space. A glance held a second longer than before, then gently released. And there were moments of distance too. Days when Luna did not come. Evenings when Jacob chose to be alone. Neither took it as rejection. They had learned the cost of assuming too much. What they were building did not resemble the stories told in town. There were no vows spoken under open sky, no grand gestures to mark a beginning, just consistency, presence, the quiet work of becoming whole again, separately first. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the river caught fire with reflected light, Luna stopped walking. "I'm afraid," she said, not looking at him. Jacob waited. "I don't want to lose myself again," she continued. "I don't want to step into something just because it's there." Jacob nodded. "Then don't." She turned to him, searching his face. "You're all right with this? With waiting?" He met her gaze. "I've been waiting my whole life," he said. "This time, I'm doing it with my eyes open." Luna smiled, not brightly, not fully, but honestly. That was enough for now. They resumed their walk, the path curving gently ahead of them. No promises followed, no conclusions were drawn. Just two people moving forward at the same pace, learning that not all beginnings arrive with urgency. Some take shape slowly, like iron under a steady hand, or trust built one quiet step at a time. The wind came hard that afternoon. It swept across the prairie without warning, bending the tall grass low and carrying dust and dry leaves in long, restless spirals. The sky had the color of cold iron, stretched wide and unsettled, as if the land itself were holding its breath. Jacob and Luna were walking the river path again. They had done this many times now, their steps falling into an easy rhythm, not hurried, not hesitant, just steady. The kind of pace you find only after you've stopped measuring distance. The wind cut sharper as they moved, slipping through the seams of Jacob's coat. Luna drew her shawl tighter around her shoulders, her breath visible in the cooling air. Without thinking, she slid her hand into the pocket of his coat. Not to take his hand, just to shield her fingers from the cold. Jacob felt the movement immediately, the warmth, the weight, the quiet trust in it. His first instinct was to still himself, to give her space. But the wind gusted again, stronger this time, and neither of them moved. Her hand remained where it was. So did his. They walked on, the river to their left, the open land to their right. The wind howled past their ears, but inside that shared pocket of warmth, the world felt strangely contained. Luna was the first to speak. "When I'm with you," she said, her voice nearly lost in the wind, "I don't feel like I have to earn my place." Jacob turned slightly toward her. "What do you mean?" "I don't have to explain myself," she continued, "or soften my words, or stay quiet so things don't become uncomfortable. I can just be." She looked at him then, her eyes clear, unguarded. The fear that had once lived there had thinned, replaced by something steadier. "I spent a long time thinking love was about proving I deserved it," Luna said. "With you, it doesn't feel like that." Jacob swallowed, his chest tightening, not with fear this time, but recognition. "And with you," he said slowly, choosing his words with care, "I don't feel afraid to say what I want anymore." The wind pressed against them again, urging them closer together. Jacob did not step away. "For most of my life," he went on, "I thought keeping quiet was the same as being careful, that if I didn't speak, I couldn't make a mistake. Turns out, silence was the mistake." Luna's fingers curled slightly in his pocket. "You're not silent anymore," she said. "No," Jacob agreed, "not with you." They stopped walking then, turning to face the river. The water moved fast beneath them, reflecting the unsettled sky. For a moment, neither of them spoke. There was no urgency in the silence now, only clarity. This was not about filling an emptiness. They had both learned what that kind of reaching could cost. Luna had learned to leave what diminished her. Jacob had learned to speak before the ground shifted beneath him. What stood between them now was not need, but readiness. "I'm not asking for anything I'm not ready to give," Luna said. "And I'm not offering something I can't stand behind," Jacob replied. Her hand remained in his pocket, his body angled slightly toward hers, protective without being possessive. The wind began to ease, its sharp edges dulling as the sky softened into late afternoon light. Somewhere upriver, a hawk cried out, its call clear and unafraid. They did not kiss. They did not name what this was. They didn't need to. They stood there side by side, grounded in the knowledge that what had brought them here was not longing or loss, but the strength to choose something with open eyes. And that, they both knew, made all the difference. There was no wedding. No crowd gathered beneath open sky, no preacher clearing his throat, no vows carved into air with borrowed words. The frontier did not pause to witness what grew quietly by the river, and neither did Jacob or Luna ask it to. Life simply continued. The forge still burned each morning, its fire fed before sunrise. Iron still rang against anvil. Sparks still leapt and vanished. The work went on, honest and demanding, as it always had. But something within it had changed. Luna moved through the forge as if it were no longer a place she visited, but one she belonged to. Not because Jacob asked her to, not because any promise had been made. She simply arrived, set down what she carried, and stayed as long as she wished. She no longer folded herself smaller to fit the space. She spoke when she had something to say. She was quiet when silence felt right. She laughed more easily now, the sound unguarded, as if it no longer needed permission. When the town watched, as towns always do, she did not look away. Jacob noticed these things without comment. He had learned that love did not need constant tending with words. It revealed itself in steadiness, in showing up, in choosing again, each day, without fear that the choice might be taken away. They shared a life that did not announce itself. Some evenings they walked the river path, hands brushing, sometimes linking, sometimes not. Other nights they ate beside the forge, the smell of iron and wood smoke mixing with simple food. There were disagreements, small ones, spoken aloud instead of swallowed. There were silences too, but they no longer carried danger. Jacob spoke now when something mattered. Not loudly, not often, but honestly. Luna listened, and when she spoke, she did not measure her words to keep the peace. The peace, they had learned, came from something else entirely. The town adjusted as towns do. People stopped whispering when it became clear there was nothing scandalous to uncover. Jacob remained the blacksmith by the river. Luna remained herself, Apache, grounded, unyielding in quiet ways that no longer needed defending. No one owned anyone. They chose each other, and they did so not because they were afraid of being alone, but because they were no longer afraid of losing themselves. On a late afternoon when the light softened and the wind lay down, Jacob stood at the anvil, shaping a piece of iron that would become nothing remarkable, just a hinge for a barn door. Luna sat nearby, watching the river move past the stones. "You ever think about how close we came to missing this?" she asked. Jacob considered the question, then nodded. "More than once. And does it bother you?" She pressed gently. He set the hammer down, wiping his hands. "It used to," he said. "Now it just reminds me why this works." Luna smiled at that. Not because it was poetic, because it was true. There was strength in the way they had arrived here. Through waiting, through restraint, through choices made without rushing toward comfort. They had learned that timing was not luck. It was readiness. The forge fire crackled as the light faded. Jacob added another piece of wood, the flame catching and settling into a steady burn. Luna rose and stood beside him, close enough to feel the warmth, far enough to remain herself. No promises were spoken. None were needed. Between them was an understanding shaped by years of silence and the courage it took to finally break it. Their love did not demand attention. It did not insist on being seen. But it endured. Out there on the edge of the prairie, where survival required patience and honor was measured by what a person chose to carry, what they had was enough. The right people, the right time, and a quiet strength that would last as long as the fire was fed. The river ran, and they continued to choose each other without fear.